This is the Steampunk Kayak. I designed the ship in Shaper 3D. This is all original work. It's in the steampunk style. I've developed it just like a real boat would be developed. It has lower decks and it has structures, framework that holds the boat together. The program's a great program for when you want to get inside and work on something. You can look and make sure everything fits correctly. The Steampunk Man is under development. The man was created in ZBrush. There are no moving parts on the model, but I had to figure out how all the parts work together. This video will show you tips on the 3D parts, how to handle them, how to cut them, and how to paint them. It will also show you how to assemble the model. This 3D model is printed in two parts. The hull is printed as one piece, and all you do is paint it. The rest of the parts, the deck parts, are printed on a frame, which you cut the pieces apart and then paint them. This shows you where all the parts are located on the frame and how they come off the frame. I just got through cutting the parts using this tool here. I like this tool because it has a very flat end right here, so you can get in real close and cut it exactly where you want to cut it so you won't have a lot of sanding. So this is the framework that's left over. This was painted all black before. It comes in white. I painted it black. It's easier to see, and it also puts the base paint down for the final paint job. You can see that you'll end up with some white spots where you cut the supports off. So this is supported in several places. You cut it close so you won't have to do a lot of sanding. And some of the pieces that are going to be down and hidden in the parts, you really don't need to even sand those. Like the telescope here. It has some supports there. You got to make sure when you cut the parts that you don't cut off part of the parts that are going to go into the model. Here's the seat. It was supported in 4 pieces. That middle piece you keep because that's a register part. This is the top hatch on the front of the boat. It was supported in 2 places. And this is the little shark that goes on the front, into the front of the hull. This is the gear shift. The parts that get cut off are not going to be really seen, but you want those smooth so they'll fit nicely on the boat. The kayak label thing was supported in 3 places. This is the steering wheel. This one's was only supported in 1 place, and you have to get in real close. And when you cut it, then you'll have a nice clean hole. And then you can sand a little bit if you want. And that's going to go right here. The flywheel is going to go right in here, close to these gears. There's a little register part right there, and that's going to go right up against this little spot here. And one of the parts that you get with all the other parts is this little cap that goes on the back. It was supported by 3 spots, and I just cut it. I haven't sanded it yet, but that just fits right on the back. Just line it up and it will slide right on there. If you sand it just slightly where those supports were, it'll go fairly close together. There'll be a little line there, but when you super glue it, you want to sand it and clean it so that it fits nice on the end there. And then you've got your boiler, and it's been supported in several places. And there's a little hole there. The gauge faces towards the cockpit where the person rides. And the opening for the boiler is right there, and that just slides right in there. And there's a little wiggle. So when you glue it, you want to make sure that that's nice and it's not touching the sides. And of course, you put that in after you put this piece in because you'll never get it in. This is the seat, and it should just drop right into that little hole there. Just like that. And this is the paddle system. Now, this one is supported in lots of different places because you want to have that thing print straight. So you see the little white dots there, and I've trimmed them pretty close. So with little sanding, they'll do fine. Now this is a very thin part, so you want to handle this with care. And it's made to go in the boat only one way, and the holes are already preset, and the length of these bars are preset. So when you cut them off of the support, they were sitting on the support just like that. And you can tell where you're supposed to cut because the supports are about 3 millimeters, and then they drop to about 2.5 to 2 millimeters. So there's a slight little groove, and that tells you where to cut it. But when you cut those off, you cut them off clean. And I haven't sanded these or anything, but there's a hole up here. And there's a hole over here, and of course there's one in the middle, and it goes right down there, and that's how it'll mount after you paint it. And then before you put the super glue in, you just want to make sure that you put a little pressure on this side so that the bar is not sitting on the side of the boat. There's a little clearance for the paddle to go by. And the telescope just slides right into here, and the little hatch goes right on the front. So if you follow the paint diagrams and the other information, you'll know exactly how to paint it and how to put it together. So I've painted the inside decks. I've painted the gears and the piping that goes with the gears silver, and there's a little silver box here. That's the piston box right there, and it's been painted silver. I painted these handles here which control the steam, and now I'm getting ready to paint the part that's brass on top of the deck. So I've taped it off with this tape, and I'm going to use a brush to paint the brass part. So this is what it looks like with the brass paint. As you can see, I painted all the areas that were taped off. I just hit the top of the cockpit area. I didn't paint the inside of that. You can paint it any way you'd like. And now I'm going to take off the tape. And if you get a couple little tiny spots to get under the tape, you can always touch them up. So I'm going to take the tape off right now. Okay, this is what it looks like with the tape off. You can see the brass looks pretty good. If there's any little spots you want to fuss with, you can always put some more black on there. But overall, it looks pretty good. And I had painted the hatch earlier, which will just go right on there, just like that. So now we're at a point where I've painted the other parts. I've got the flywheel, got the seat that'll go in there, got the paddle assembly that'll go in there too. And we have the little telescope. It's going to go right in here. And I've got my little tag, the Steampunk Kayak. And I got a few more parts, but that's kind of what it's going to look like, and I'm going to start assembling it soon. But before I do that, I'm going to need to paint this rub rail. This little rail along here needs to be painted brass too. So I'm going to tape that off, and I'm going to paint that. Well, I've painted the boat at this point, so it's all been painted. I painted the rudder on the bottom. I painted this deck up on the top here. There's the little hatch. It's not quite square, so you have to line it up, and it will drop right on there. And if you'd like, you can just not glue it. If you don't glue it, then you can open it up and you can see some of the decks below. This is supposed to be a storage compartment here. This little box here is for the storage of whatever fuel, if it's going to be wood for the boiler or if it's going to be cold. So you could put a little bit of fake cold in there if you'd like. I put a pen, a common straight pen, and there was a little hole here, and I enlarged it by using a little pen vise. Just went in there and drilled a little bit so that I could get the pen to go in there, and I super glued it into that little hole. The boat steering wheel will go right on the shaft, and then I'll cut it once I get the wheel in position, and then I can cut the shaft off right at the end of where the wheel will be. So I used my cutters. I cut the shaft shorter so I could put the steering wheel on there and slide it on. And so once it's on, now if you'd like it to turn, you can take a little piece of plastic or some kind of a device and put it on the end of it and crimp it down so that you can have the steering wheel move if that's something you'd like. If you just want it in position, then you can just put a little super glue, cut off any excess shaft that there might still be on there. I'm going to show you how to put this part on. This part's a little tricky. This is the flywheel and the piston rod that drives it. And it's going to go right in there, and this rod is going to go towards piston control box. It's really not going to hook up. It's just going to go in there far enough so that it looks like it connects to it. So in order to do that, there's a little gap underneath this rod right here. And you want to make sure that it's pointing this way, and this front end slips underneath that rod. And then there's a little registration part right here that will help you guide it into position. So what you do is you put it in, you make sure that front end is underneath that rod I was pointing out, and you have it over as far as you can get it. And then you're going to bend this part to go underneath this part. So you don't want to bend it any more than you have to, but you want to bend it enough. Just got to be a little brave so it's strong enough where it won't break. So now it's under that front rod and it's pushed all the way towards the front. You want to make sure there's clearance, so when you put the boiler in, it's got a little hatch on the front for where you put the firewood in. And there's a gauge on the front. I have a little decal that I print on my printer, and I just cut it out and glued it in there and covered it with some varnish. And so this slides in right in there. And then when you're going to glue this, you're going to make sure that this isn't touching the sides. And you want to make sure that this is in the right position where it's not bumping up against the boiler. So once that looks good, then you can take this out. And then you can use your super glue and put a little tiny drop right on that register mark, right on, just a couple of little drops here just to hold that part in. It's not going to go anywhere, so it doesn't need a lot of glue to hold it. So I'm going to take my super glue and I'm going to put just a little bit along that edge right there. And if you get any super glue where you don't want it, just come in there with a little paper towel and pick up any excess. So that's enough glue to keep the part in position. Once that hardens in a minute or two, I use a medium super glue, so it takes a few minutes to set up, gives me a chance to make sure parts are in the right place, and then that won't go anywhere. It'll just sit right there. This is the boiler, and it's going to face, the opening to the boiler faces to the front of the boat, and the gauge faces towards the rider, and it's going to go right in there. Has a little hole it fits in. So I'm going to put a little super glue on it. So it drops right in, and I want to make sure that it's not leaning against the side over here, so it looks pretty straight. So I'm just going to hold it in position for a few minutes while that glue sets up. There's a little square, a little indent in the deck right there is where the gear shift's going to go. This is the gear shift, and you're going to put a little super glue on the bottom and on the side that faces the wall. And you're going to put it in a position kind of like that. And I'm going to go ahead and glue it, and then I'll show it to you. Okay, so I've glued the gear shift, and it leans slightly forward. You can position it pretty much any way you want. Now I'm going to glue in the paddle assembly. This is what it looks like. Once you put the paddle assembly in position, you've got this one in the back hole. You've got this one in the center hole, and this one in the hole closest towards the bow. So that's in the right position. And so the easiest way to glue this is to use your applicator. Put a little drop right down that hole and right down the center shaft hole. This is a medium glue, so it takes a few minutes to set up. And then when you have it in position, you want to put a little weight on it so you make sure that this rod is not landing on the deck. And then just hold it for a few minutes and let it set up. And then we'll come back and put a little drop right on that rod so that everything is secure. And once it's in its correct position, you can always add more glue. After your paddle assembly has set up and dried, on the back is the rudder control that's connected to the boat wheel. I'm going to use this little chain, this little brass chain, and I'm going to string it through here right into the hole. You thread it through this hole, and then out to the other side, and then down this hole. And I'll show it to you before I glue it. Okay, I've got some of the chain sitting in this hole, and it is strung through the control arm, and it's going to go into this hole. But in order to put a little tension on it, I'm going to first put a little glue on this hole. So just put a little drop in there, and then give it some time to dry. And then we'll come back, drop it in the other hole, and glue the other side. Okay, once you drop the chain in there, you want to work it until it gets where it looks a little tight. You don't have any kinks in it. And then you come in with your super glue. So once you have it, then the chain looks like there's a little pressure on it, and then give it some time to dry. And that's how you put the chain on. Now we have a little shark to put on the front, and we're going to put a little tiny drop of super glue in the holes here, and then we're going to put the shark in position. So I'm going to do that off camera to make sure I get it right. Okay, the shark has been glued in position on the front of the bow. We have the telescope in position, and it's not glued so it can swivel. You can glue it if you'd like. And then the last thing we need to do is glue the seat in position. So there's a little registration tab, and then it just kind of drops in position. Kind of see how it fits. Put a little super glue and then glue that. Now the wheel, if you choose to add a rider, the rider that I designed, it's too hard to put the rider in with the wheel in position, so therefore don't glue the wheel in position until you put the rider in. Once you have the rider in, then you can put the wheel on, position it to where you want, and then you can glue it. So that finishes the model. The model does not come with a stand. From the arts and crafts store, you can get some wire, tubing, and a wood plaque to build your own stand. See the description for links for items that were mentioned in this video. This model is printed by iMaterialize.com. If you want to build your own model, go to iMaterialize.com. You will find my listing there. I hope you enjoyed this video, and happy modeling.